Hey, everybody, welcome back to 360 Success Podcast, where we help you build a business you can scale and a life you don't have to escape from. I'm your host, Dr. Ryan Knight, and today we're diving deep into a phrase that's become a cornerstone to our brand, this movement, and this mission, the scalable life. Now, I've referenced this in previous podcasts, but I started thinking, I haven't really done a deep dive or even defined this for our audience. We call it the scalable life because it's never just business. Let's unpack what this really means beyond the surface and how applying the concept of scaling your whole life, not just your business, can truly create a life worth living. What does scalable mean in business? You hear the word scalable tossed around in the entrepreneurial world, and what does it actually mean? At its core, it just means doing more with less friction. You can increase your output without having to proportionally increase input. You build systems and teams and assets that multiply effort without multiplying burnout. So 1+1 = 3 sort of thing, or 1+1 could equal 5. That would be a great scaling model in strictly number sense. You can do things like automate lead generation or service delivery. You can delegate that. It could be building a team that doesn't just help you, they can run without you. Literally removes you as the bottleneck, especially in the service industry. A lot of times things are tied directly to the professional and everything has to flow through you. So maybe you're a doctor and you've been struggling to really grow your business or grow into the next level, and you need to develop scalable systems that can do that, and so that everything doesn't have to touch you or go through you in order for you to grow. So instead of being a technician, a firefighter, therapist, and the janitor all in your own business, you become the visionary, the strategist, and the architect. But here's the truth that most people miss. You can build a scalable business and still have an unscalable life. Hear what I said. You can build a scalable business and still have an unscalable life. And that's where this podcast, this episode's coming in. Let me just tell you this. Maybe you've reached what you consider success or a pinnacle of success in a certain area in business, let's say. But I want you to just sit with that for a minute. And I want you to think about and evaluate your life. And then I want you to listen to this. There is more. Whatever level you're at, there is more, because you can scale your life right along with your business. So let's take the same mindset of scaling business, leveraging multiplication, efficiency, and bring it into your life. We use the 4 foundations at 360 Success as our compass. That's faith, family, fitness, and finances. So let's break this down. Faith. What would it look like to scale spiritual growth? I'm a Christian. I'm not telling you have to be a Christian, but that's where I come from. So if you were to scale your spiritual growth, it wouldn't necessarily be by spending more hours reading or meditating, although those are great things. And if you have the time or you create the time to do those things, those will grow you. But it's really about developing rhythms or triggers, community that strengthens you, and alignment in those areas. You see, faith habits that you do consistently will multiply peace, they'll multiply your identity, and they'll bring clarity every day. Designing a spiritual operating system that doesn't run on willpower, it runs in the background and consistently feeds your soul. Family. A lot of times as we build success, we struggle with this. That's one of the cornerstones or things that triggered me to start 360 Success Coach, is to help doctors scale their life. Matter of fact, I've thought about changing the name of this podcast and this coaching program to the Scalable Life. You see, scaling your relationship doesn't mean seeing your kids more hours necessarily. It means creating quality, intentionality, and repeatable magic moments. Date night needs to be a non-negotiable system. Amy and I, every week, we make a point. Either we sit down and we have lunch together, or I take her out, usually both, during the week. Family meetings. These aren't always comfortable. And as your kids get older, they can be great and they can be productive. But even when they're younger, laying out your week, knowing what's upcoming, let it become a culture building ritual, if you will. Maybe it's family game night or playing cards or games with the little kids, or, just the daily routines. You see, your presence will multiply even when your schedule is tight if you're intentional about it. And in these times, people say, well, I need more quality time with my kids or my spouse or whatever. How many times have you gone to dinner or been sitting in a restaurant and the kids are sitting at the table eating and they're playing or they're getting in trouble, but they almost seem like a distraction because the parent is on their phone the whole time? Or you see couples out having dinner and they're sitting there scrolling and taking pictures of their food or whatever, and they're not looking at each other and they're not talking. If you want to build deep family relationships, you have to be intentional, make eye contact, and communicate with your family and those that you love. The next core is fitness. What does scalable health look like? Man, I've struggled with my weight off and on. Well, there's no off. I've just struggled with my weight most of my life. I played sports when I was younger, so that helped offset a lot of things. But man, when I didn't and I got into chiropractic school, I gained a ton of weight. But oftentimes, as the first of the year is coming up in a few months, everyone starts over and it's the latest fad. If you just drink this or you'll just inject this peptide, it'll be a miracle. And I'm not talking bad about peptides. I actually like them. But it's never just one thing. You see, you can't have a yo-yo diet or extreme 90-day push. Those things can motivate you to keep going, but most people don't keep going. You have to figure out what's the minimum effective dose of movement, rest, nutrition, and self-care. And then do that daily. Daily routines like ending your day with mobility and hydration. You see, you build resilience through compounding, not overexertion. So making sure that those workouts create flexibility, they create endurance, they create mobility, again, like flexibility, and then increasing strength. Think of it as automated energy, like putting vitality on autopilot. You just make it part of your daily routine. And what I found is that it needs to be frequent, minimum of 3 days a week, preferably like 5 days a week. If you're over 40, it needs to be 5 to 6 days a week of serious exertion in order to maintain your health and vitality. And the next stage is finances. Scaling your personal finances isn't just about making more money. We often spend as much or more than we make. And that is a problem in society today. The average American probably spends about 110 to 120% of what they make. And that is a recipe for disaster. I mean, that's kind of like taking financial advice from the government, if you will. Of course, they spend quite a bit more than that. But one of the keys to scaling your finances is to try to turn your income into assets, appreciable assets, not just buying, you know, the newest car, the coolest clothes or whatever, but it's things that actually increase in value, which those things are very few. Sometimes it could be jewelry, but that's really way down the list. A lot of times that's one of the first things people go to is flashy jewelry or automobiles or things like that. Automobiles depreciate very quickly. Jewelry depends on the price of gold or whatever the jewelry is made out of. But real estate assets, buildings, land, those things, if you hold those over time, especially if they spin off cash regularly, that can be a huge thing. So if you'll sacrifice some things now, build up cash reserves, and then start leveraging that into property that will generate additional income for you, that's how you scale. It's usually not very quick, but you can do it over time and start to leverage those assets into more and more. It's very powerful. So assets, you turn those assets into cash flow, and the cash flow turns into freedom. Just imagine if you spent or saved 20% of your income. It doesn't matter what you make, 20%, and you started a investment nest egg, if you will. And then once you reach a certain threshold, let's say that you want to buy a property that is $100,000. And that's pretty low in today's economy, but let's just use that for simple math. And you want to buy a property that's $100,000 and you know that you're going to need 20% down on the property. Maybe it needs fixing up and things like that. But there are all kinds of loans out there, like the SBA, that you can actually borrow money that will help you to remodel it and all that. But you need 20% of the loan value. Larger loans, sometimes they'll go 10%. It just depends. But you can buy properties that will spin off, let's say, $100,000 property. Takes you $20,000 to get into the property. But then maybe it generates $2,000 or $2,500 a month in rental income, or maybe that's where you have your business. And so instead of paying rent to someone else, you are building your net worth by making the payments every month towards that property rather than spending it on rent and building someone else's net worth. Same thing with a home. The first thing I tell young couples is buy a home. Listen, I know that there's investment people out there that say absolutely do not do that. Some of the big real estate guys right now that are popular will say, don't do that. Well, I disagree. To me, home ownership is like forced savings, and there are different laws that apply to it. On capital gains and things like that. So I recommend buying a home as soon as you can. And listen, it doesn't have to be the dream home. That's why they call them starter homes. One of the things I see young couples doing is they will rent. They're paying $3,000 a month in rent. And rather than living in a place for, say, $1,500 a month and putting the other $1,500 towards savings so that they can actually afford to buy a house, that maybe their payment, taxes and insurance is $3,000 a month. But now they're actually building their net worth rather than just throwing it away every month in rent. Kind of got on a tangent there. I really, really like real estate, but whether it's investing in real estate or buying back your time, setting up tax efficient structures, the LLCs that you set up through real estate and things like that too can create some tax advantages, even if you're still drawing a regular salary. Scaling your wealth is what will allow you to stop working for money and start having money work for you in your life. Our goal ultimately is to reverse engineer a life that's worth living. Here's a mistake most high performers make. They scale their business first and they just hope and pray that their life will catch up later. They work hard for their families and the prestige or whatever it is, whatever is their motivating factor. They do put all this energy in and they lose the very thing that they work so hard for. But here's the truth I've discovered coaching doctors, entrepreneurs, and leaders for over 30 years. You don't get a scalable life by accident. You get it by reverse engineering it from the outcome you want most. Ask yourself, what do you want your Tuesdays to feel like 3 years from now? What kind of energy do you want when you walk through your door at home at the end of the day? What level of freedom, fulfillment, and focus do you want on a normal, boring Thursday? Because that, not revenue or followers, is the scoreboard that matters. The process. The process is defining your end goal in each of the 4 foundations. Audit your current systems, what's working and what's leaking. Install leverage points. Delegation, automation, boundaries, and routines that help you maximize the 4 pillars. And then you have to protect the margin that you create. So if you have a boundary for this is family time, being an entrepreneur, I get it, but you have to protect that margin. So you always have to make sure that I'm making time. And sometimes you have to create the time. You have to get up earlier. Maybe you sacrifice some sleep to make sure everything's taken care of. But protect the margins that you create in your life with your finances and with your family time and those things. And then iterate quarterly. What does that mean? Be the CEO of your life. Evaluate the direction things are going. What are your outcomes looking like? If you extrapolate out the current progress and the things that you're doing, is that going to look like you want it to 3 years from now, 5 years from now? Make little adjustments now, and down the road, those can pay off big. Scaling without losing your soul. This whole concept of the scalable life, because it's never just business, it's not a slogan. It's a standard. It's a declaration that says, I refuse to be wildly successful, but empty inside. I won't sacrifice my marriage to build a legacy just for my kids. I won't chase a business that leaves me spiritually dry or physically wrecked. You can build big, love deep, and live free. That's not a fantasy. It's a formula. But only if you're willing to build the life with as much intention as you build the business. If today's episode stirred something in you and you're done playing the game where the business wins and your life loses, I want to invite you to take the next step. Shoot me a message. You can DM me or shoot me an email at 360successcoach@gmail.com, and I'll send you the Scalable Life audit worksheet. Also, you can send me a message or an email if you'd be interested in the 360 Success Life Map coaching program that we're about to launch, or just shoot me a message and let's start the conversation. And remember, this isn't about balance. It's about building. It's not about doing more. It's about doing what matters most, because it's never just business. This is the Scalable Life, and you were made for it. I'm Dr. Ryan Knight. Thanks for listening to 360 Success Podcast. Until next time, build big, love deep, and live free.